Hi, friends, and welcome back to the second episode of the Fourth Wing series as I talk about Iron Flame today. If you are joining for the first time, I would encourage you to go listen to my context episode to get an understanding of this podcast and what I owe it to myself is and what I'm trying to do with this journey of mine, and also to listen to the Fourth Wing one. I would assume if you're listening to Iron Flame that you are a fan of the series, that you've read the first book and want to continue listening on. Anyway, again, I want to welcome you here or welcome you back. I appreciate everybody listening. I hope that you've connected with me on social media and YouTube and that you're following along. For Iron Flame, we have two parts, and so much happens. Very similar to Fourth Wing, I had to refamiliarize myself a bit with the story and the characters. There's so much that happens in so many details. So again, I'm not here to recount everything in the book. With that, let's go ahead and dive in. So coming off of Fourth Wing, we find Violet in a place waking up from having been injured from the attack that happened as a result of them thinking that they were going to war games for school, and it ended up being an ambush and a real attack by Wyvern and Venom. So we find Violet in the Ryerson house, waking up from having been poisoned and injured from the attack that happened at Athbean, which she was there with a certain group of squad members thinking that they were doing like a challenge for school as a part of war games, which is one of the final things that they do before graduation. And so where we left off in Fourth Wing is she's waking up and Brennan is there, and she hasn't seen her brother Brennan in 6 years because he died 6 years ago. And so you realize that he is alive and well, and he welcomes her to the revolution. So we start off Iron Flame right away with her obviously reeling from the fact that he's alive and wanting to know a lot of things. Also immediately going into having feelings about the fact that Xaden knew about Brennan being alive the entire time that he's known her, wondering what the hell this revolution is and what has been going on. And just a lot of information comes flooding in. Emotions are really, really high. You're experiencing a lot of different things, right? Grateful that Brennan is alive, pissed at Xaden, proud of Xaden, proud of Brennan, confused though, because why is the revolution, like why is this needed? You know, there's just a lot of stuff that is happening. But ultimately you realize that Violet is processing a lot of information, including the fact that Venom and Wyvern are real. Like, yes, she knew that because she fought them, right? But when the dust settles and you have a minute to kind of catch up with her and just all of the story that we've even heard as readers, you realize that all of this information, including the Venom, Wyvern, Brennan, Xaden, all of it, it's just information overload in a lot of different ways and a lot of different emotions and feelings. And ultimately, you know that because of the threat of Venom and Wyvern, there's a lot of stuff that Navarre and Navarre leadership is keeping secret and is lying about. And Violet's pissed about all of these things, and again is feeling a ton of emotions. And a big part of that is obviously the loss of Liam. So in that battle, Xaden's brother from foster care, Liam, dies, and Xaden had him protect Violet and guard her when they were more separated in her first year. And so you're coming into this book with a heavy heart. Liam's death was really tragic and was really hard to read because Violet was there and was with him, and it's just, Liam was like the sweetest soul in the way that their interactions were. And it was a gut-wrenching death. And so she's, dealing with all of this stuff and comes to this realization rather quickly that nothing that she knew is real. And she has to reorient herself into what the reality is. And that is a hard thing to process, right? And one of the parts of all of this is that all of the people who are at the Ryerson house, which is this house and compound that Xaden has, that the revolution has been happening in, the ones that were involved in the war games with Violet realized that everyone at the college thinks that they're dead. So there is a very real possibility that they could just stay and let them think that, and pull a Brennan and just do what they need to do, or they could go back And Brennan wants them to stay, but Xaden wants them to go back because he feels like all of the other people who are there, the revolutionaries, any of the kids from the rebellion that he's been trying to protect over the years, he's like, they're going to kill them all. Like, we have to go back. And they say that they can kind of work on the inside of the school, now having more of them know about the revolution on the outside and work that angle. So ultimately they go back. Everybody is, mixed emotions of seeing them alive. The people who wanted them dead, which is Dane's dad and this guy, Major Varish, and anyone associated with them, obviously doesn't want to see them alive. Violet's mom didn't know that an attack happened, like that it was, set up to be intentional. Now, Violet and them let me clarify that. They don't necessarily say that it was intentional, but they say that they were sent there specifically by Dane's dad and that they were ambushed, and they are implying, right, that some nefarious shit had happened because even Violet's mom is like, why would you empty an outpost for just war games? Like, that's not really what happens. And that's what tipped them off when they got to the outpost in Athbean. So she is like, we need to have a talk, and obviously is upset and not involved in any of it. Dane didn't know that was going to happen. But everyone that was involved in the situation at Athbean knows that Dane used his powers to take a memory from Violet and that related to this whole revolution and whatever, and that he told his dad and that his dad had them killed or attacked. And so they don't trust Dane. Dane is fuck Dane, right? And so, but also people like Rhiannon, she wasn't with them. She was a part of a different squad for war games. And so they all decided, we're not telling anybody else. We're not putting anyone else in danger. We have to protect this revolution. We have to protect these realities. So we have to be here as if we are just pissed about what happened and that's it. And what that means is that Violet has to have secrets from Rhi, and she can't be honest about how Liam died. And she can't really confide in her in the way that she needs to, which is particularly tough because in this book, Xaden graduates. And when Xaden graduates, he becomes a lieutenant and he's not at the school anymore. And so they have to figure out this balance of like, how do we stay close because of our dragons needing to be close and us obviously wanting to be close when I'm in the real world and when you're still at school. And so the school knows that has to happen. But because Varish is such a dick, he says that you can only see each other every 7 days and only for 2 days. And so it's going to just be hell because the dragons are never apart for more than like a couple days at a time. So he's already making their lives a living hell. So you set off in this book just hitting the ground running with a lot of stuff happening. You also get introduced to new characters. You get introduced to this kid named Cam, who is going by the name Eric or Arik, and he is one of the king's sons. And Violet knows that, but nobody else knows that. And you don't know yet right away as to why he's there, and you find out later. And then you also see Liam's sister. And I don't think Violet knew that Liam's sister was coming in the class. And when Sloane figures out who Violet is, she hates her because she thinks that Liam died because of Violet. And so that is obviously a really hard thing. And that is a big switch. Like when that comes up in the book, it's almost a big emotional switch for Violet because there's a lot of high anxiety and tension happening from their lives being threatened and from knowing they can't trust the people at the school, such as Varish and Colonel Atos and Dane himself and like all this shit. But there's a soft spot that comes with Sloane because of the relation to Liam, that anytime those interactions happen, it's really heart-wrenching because you know that Violet just wants to help her and Sloane wants nothing to do with her. So there's a lot that's going to happen with that aspect of things. With all of this going on, again, not everybody knows about what happened at Athbean exactly. And so what you do see is a little bit more involvement from Imogen. She is there to just kind of, I think, keep an eye on Violet because Xaden's not around and knows that she's going through some shit. And so she offers to run with her when Violet wants to train and run. She offers to like help Sloane on behalf of Violet without Sloane knowing because Violet wants Sloane to survive, but Sloane wants nothing to do with her. So you see a few alliances that happen that kind of soften the blow of a lot of the other things that are happening. But also the harassment from Varish is so immediate and continuous. It's fucking nauseating. Like he is one of those characters that is nails on a chalkboard. You want to punch his face in. And it's very similar to Umbridge vibes from Harry Potter where they're so evil and the writing for their character and the way that these characters come to life is so good. You hate them, but it's also just, it's so good for the story and for the writing, right? You have to appreciate the way that it makes you feel and the quality of writing to make you feel that way. So he's awful, and he just makes her life a living hell. He searches her bag regularly when she leaves to go see Xaden, and just on random times when he and his cronies feel like it, to see if she has anything that she shouldn't have. He like wants to pin her for this revolution by having like these daggers that are made of materials that they shouldn't have, but the material is the only thing that kills venom. So he wants to paint her as a traitor and say that she's been part of the revolution that's been helping the Paromial people and the Griffin riders, even though Xaden is the one who's been doing it and she just knows about it. Varys knows these things, but they don't always say it out loud because not everybody else knows. And if people knew, then they would know that Navarre and their leadership are not helping Paromial people, and that they've been lying about Venom and Wyvern, or not talking about the real threat that's out in the world. And it would potentially divide people. They would either think that Navarre was doing it for their best interest, which is the bullshit lies that they tell themselves, or that they just don't give a shit about anyone else and want to live in their little warded bubble and let everyone else die because the Venom can't get in through the ward. But the Paromial people and the Griffins are trying to get into Navarre and attack certain outposts because they need the material. They need the weapons because they're unprotected. They're unwarded. And so they don't want to kill the Navarrian people, but also it's like, you're not helping us. So you know the truth. You're not telling people. You're not telling your cadets and your lieutenants. So like, we don't give a shit if you don't give a shit about us. But the reality is the Paromial people and the Navarrians should in theory be on the same side to fight the Venom, right? And so there's just a lot of those dynamics that are happening, and Varys knows, and Violet knows, and Varys knows Violet knows, but he just makes her life a living hell. So he's a constant throughout. And, you know, what you start to see is essentially it gets progressively worse. He tortures her through training by saying, if you don't produce Andarna and I want to see you train with her and fly with her, then I'm going to punish you. And Violet doesn't, because what also happens is when she wakes up from the battle that happened at Athbean and like from the poison and being healed, and she sees Andarna again, she realizes that Andarna is way bigger and also black now. And so the reality is that Andarna, they don't know for sure that she's the same type of dragon as Taryn, but like she's a badass because of this and the color, and they have to protect that secret. And so nobody can know. At least they're trying to avoid people from knowing for now. And the other rub though is Andarna is not awake. She went into the dreamless sleep, which I think is something that happens when dragons get to a certain age. That's why normally dragons are older when they bond with people at the threshing. Andarna was so young that I don't think that riders experience the dreamless sleep of their dragon. They meet dragons after that more often than not. But the dreamless sleep is like a different amount of time for every dragon, and it's a long time. So Violet is just lying to this man so he doesn't catch on or know anything. Essentially makes her train so hard that she burns out and she basically almost dies, and then her friends have to help her survive through it. And then, as if that all wasn't crazy enough, they have this new class, this like RSC class that Professor Grady says that they're going to start going through, which is to have them train without the reliability of their dragon. And that he says at the beginning of the year, like, this is going to come up in different challenges and stuff at different times. So just be prepared. So they have their normal schedule of classes and training and whatever. Violet is also flying to see Xaden whenever she can amongst this stupid 7-day rule. And Xaden will come to her when he can, but he has to basically earn a weekend pass to be able to come. But also Varys has fucked with them before and sent him out on a 24-hour mission, so he couldn't come. So they've missed a weekend to where the dragons went 2 full weeks without each other, and it's like actually painful for them, and they suffer from that separation. So Varys is just cruel on every single level that he can be. And then in amongst all of that, they get kidnapped to do an RSC class. So it's the school doing it with the teachers, and they basically send them out to go do certain challenges. And one of them is they get kidnapped and put out into the woods. And during that process, one of the people gets killed, not the main group, but one of the young students that they're with. And you just realize that Varys is putting them in these situations of such increased danger. He's torturing Violet. He's relentless, and he's trying to also kill anyone who was a part of the Athbean mission and part of the revolution. He's just doing this under the guise of training and using his power as an authority in the school to do it. But yet people don't really know. Like, her friends do. And people around them know some shit is up, I think, but nobody is coming to him every time someone dies and saying that this is your fault or you're doing this or whatever. Like, he's just so manipulative and I hate to say it, cunning behind the scenes, that he's just such a huge threat, and it's within the walls that they're in. But they're supposed to be there as if they're students. They're trying to act like everything's normal. They can't just dip out and go back to the Ryerson house. They would have to drop out of school, and then people would wonder where they are now that they know they're alive. They chose to go back. They have to be back. So there's just a lot happening in this very crude dynamic going on with Varish in the way that he's ruling and the role he's playing in Violet's life. And all the while, she can't see Xaden that often, and she can't talk to Rhee really about anything because Rhee doesn't know what happened at Athbean, and they all said that they wouldn't tell. So a lot of her friends, like Sawyer and Rhee, don't know what actually went down and how Liam died. So it's just a really tumultuous time and a really hard time, but there's a couple of allies. As I said, Imogen tries to help and kind of be there for Violet and for Sloane. And then you also know Jesinia.Jesinia's in the archives, and she's a scribe. And one of the other things that's happening is that as people are trying to get information about certain stuff or asking the scribes for information that shouldn't be at the archives, or that quote unquote isn't there, but maybe is, that they're just not giving up, those people are being taken and like beaten and killed. And so it is so clear that Navarre just truly is holding down the fort and not wanting people to know anything about the realities of why attacks are happening or people are dying. But Jesinia entertains what it is that Violet's asking for and will get her books. She will also not write down when Violet checks out certain things or what she's checking out. And so you just know that Jesinia is an ally. She's a real one, and she's there to support Violet. And it's so important because, again, Violet's on this island. There's so many people that she can't confide in. Hell, Mira doesn't even know that Brennan's alive. And granted, Mira's not around because she's like, Xaden is graduated and out in the real world, right? She's much older, but she can't tell anybody anything. Anyway, it's just, she's really in this place of where you start to feel like she's there and people have her back like they always do, and her squad will always ride for her. But she also can't tell them everything. And then she gets sometimes moments where she can talk to people who do know, but it's just never enough. And so the anxiety and the emotion and the tension is really, really high, which can be also very stressful, you know, as a reader, because you're just trying to keep reading to get through, but more and more shit keeps happening. So throughout all of this, though, Violet is doing research. So Jesinia is helping her get some of these books. And a lot of it is because at the core of the story, the reality is that the Venin and the Wyvern are real, but they're the true enemy for everyone involved, whether they know it or not. And the only way to defeat the Venin is to have the weapons of that certain material that Xaden has been smuggling out of Navarre and giving Paromial people, is using that material to make weapons and daggers, which Xaden already has. Also is with wards. And so Navarre is under a ward. Violet is protected within that ward, as is anybody else who's at Basgiath. And so a lot of the outposts and stuff like that were tied to Basgiath and Navarre are warded as well. But again, people like the Paromial people don't have access to that. So what Violet is trying to do is figure out how can they create a ward? How can they use that material also? Because I believe it can be used to create weapons, but I believe it's also used to imbue another object to create a ward. And Violet is trying to do research to figure out how to do that. The historics of this, I think, say the original 6 got Navarre and Basgiath to where it is and created the ward in the first place, but they don't ever talk about how it was done. And that's some of that information and history that the archives and like Navarre don't want you to know, right? Or even don't know themselves for a lot of different reasons. And so Violet is trying to piece it together, and that's what Jesinia is kind of helping her with. And so Xaden is obviously pissed about this because Violet would get killed for that. And so he wants her to be safe when he's not around, but she's like, I have to do this. Like, we have to figure out how to protect other areas of the world, whether that's Paromial, whether that's Ryerson House, wherever we are, right? We got to find ways to protect more people because this is a real threat. That is her underlying mission through everything, while all this other stuff is happening. As all of this is happening, like I had mentioned, that RSC class, training class is happening, it gets progressively worse. after the forest situation where one of their classmates died, they end up getting kidnapped again, and they have this challenge where they have to get through one room to like another room, and they do, and then they're all recaptured or led or whatever to this dungeon area, and Violet is strapped to a chair, and they basically say that you have to tell us a secret that you have, and if you don't, we're going to beat you. And then when we're done, we're going to trade you out for someone else in this room, and we're going to repeat the process. And they're like, what the fuck is this? Like, this isn't survival without our dragon. This is torture. And they're like, well, your enemies will torture you. Your dragon may not be there to help you, or you may not be able to communicate with them. So deal with it. And they just know that the people who are running this is Varish. And so he is towing that line so hard, but really also if they die, he doesn't care. And so it's like quote unquote school and quote unquote training, but it's like a real life threat. And so Violet is in the chair first, and they beat the shit out of her. And she basically says something about how Navarre, I think it's either that like Navarre is leaving Paromish people unprotected and they're dying by attacks, or that they're attacking Paromish people. Because again, the Paromial as a place is attacking Navarre for their materials. And so I do think that there's a little back and forth there of like defense, but also trying to attack them, because the Paromial people know the truth about Wyvern and Venom. So if Navarre kills them, the secret dies with them. And that's this whole thing that Varish has been saying this whole book. He's like, the secret dies with the person who knows it. The secret dies with the secret holder. And so all of this stuff that Violet knows, Varish has been trying to kill her and anyone that was at Athmine that whole time, because then it's safe. If they are all dead, there's no threat of people knowing anything else except for everyone in the revolution, who I don't think Varish knows the extent of that. So he doesn't know that even if they die, there's a whole ton of other people that are already involved and know the reality. So anyway, she says something, and I think that they like accept it, but they still like beat her. And then Nolan like comes and heals her, and then they just repeat the process. And at one point, Dane comes in the room, and Varish is like commanding Dane to use his power, and he essentially doesn't, because he knows that he's not going to violate Violet again, and he's disgusted with the whole thing. But Violet realizes that Varish is the one that's been training Dane to use his signet and hone it. And so Violet then wonders what is Varish's signet, because they don't actually know. And so that's just like an interesting dynamic, because again, Dane is senior. He knows way more than a lot of other people because of his ability to read memories. And if Varish is training him, then you think that there's something there with Varish being able to do the same thing or something similar, which is interesting, but there's a question mark there. But at least Dane gets a little bit of like a reprieve because he won't touch her. Anyway, they end up escaping because Violet ends up getting beaten so bad one of the times that Nolan has to heal her in the infirmary. And then he chooses to escort her back, and he ends up leaving the door not latched all the way. So they end up using that as their opportunity to get out. He essentially was helping them get out. And, you know, life goes on, ironically enough, or crazily enough, even though it's totally psychotic that is kinds of things that they're just getting away with under the guise of training in class. But one of the things that is so wild about this whole thing is you find out why Nolan is so wrecked. And in one of the classes that they have, the teacher ends up announcing that Jack Barlow is alive. And you realize that Violet never killed him. Like she struck lightning, she took down a mountain on him, and he died in book 1. And shock and awe, surprise, surprise, he didn't die. And of course, you're just like, really? Of everything that's going on, of all of the trials and tribulations, really? And as he starts to integrate with people, he's different. He's nice. And Violet's like, why? And he uses it under the guise of like, well, I got a second chance at life kind of thing. But it's just creepy and weird. And you know that it's tied to Varish. So you're like, there's something with this that's not okay. And so throughout the book, or at least part 1, you're getting a lot of understanding of just all these layers of different conflicts that's happening, and Violet trying to sort through them without Xaden being around all the time, them trying to heal their relationship because of him lying and not telling her things, but also him trying to help her train so she can keep her guard up in her mind, so that way he can tell her things. And like he starts to slowly kind of confide in her. Like, it's just, there's so much that's happening and going on. And Varish is just the worst of the worst. The one thing I forgot to mention, it happened earlier on in the book, but one of my favorite parts was early on when Varish did burn out Violet during training. He told her she had to use her signet so much to quote unquote practice that he almost burned her out and killed her. When that happened, the next time that he tried to pull some shit like that, Taryn communicated with his dragon Solus to be like, fuck no, like, we don't answer to you. Dragons don't answer to any human. And Indarna is not going to come if she doesn't want to. And ended up biting Solus's neck and piercing his neck because Varish wouldn't let up until the point where Varish was on his knees, because if his dragon dies, Varish dies. And that opened the floodgates for Varish to be even more brutal. But in the moment of it happening, it was so epic. And it was just so awesome. Like, Violet did get mad at Taryn, but she was also like, fuck yeah. Because again, Varish is like nails on a chalkboard. He's so evil and cruel. But I just had to say that was one of my favorite parts, where Taryn was just such a badass in a way that wasn't just fighting. He was protecting Violet and had her back. And I just needed that. Varish was already enough at that point that I needed him to be so quickly humbled, and he was. But you knew it was going to open the floodgates, and it surely did. So all this other stuff happens, right? Fast forward to all those other moments with RSC, this terrible dungeon situation. They just continue to persist, though. They just continue to go to school. They continue to just like try to get through life as if all of this is like normal while all of these things are happening. And after all of that goes down, Violet ends up telling Ree and Sawyer and anyone else in her squad that wasn't with her at Athbean what happened. She tells them that Venom and Wyvern are real. She tells them what happened to Liam. She tells them why she couldn't tell them. She just lays it all out there. And they obviously have a lot of mixed emotions to this, but they basically resolve that they have to help Violet. There's no way that they're going to let her do this alone. And they also have the same values and morals as her. And we have to protect anybody that we can, including ourselves. But any of these other places that are unprotected, we're going to help you figure out how to create a ward and like do what you need to do, which is great. It's a relief to go through that much of the book. That ends up being like 30 some chapters. And it's part 1, mind you. To go through that much of the book and to just be so secretive and have so much like conflict with Ree because she can't tell her the truth. It's such a relief to have the squad fully in the know and everybody on the same page. But that isn't before shit really goes down with Violet. So one of the last times that they take her for this quote unquote RSC is just her by herself, and Varish tortures her. And Dane comes again, like they make him come, and he basically says that he'll do it and he'll read her mind. And he does read her memory, and he tells Varish what he knows. And so Violet is like betrayed, right? Because you think Dane's going to bow out of it, but Varish is relentless and Dane gives in. But it's like a fake out to where he tells him the truth, but he ends up taking a weapon, and instead of killing Violet, because Varish is like, kill her now. And instead of killing Violet, which you think for a hot second Dane's going to be that guy, he kills Varish. And when that is going down, Xaden like bursts through and kills the other person in the room. And everyone is there. And you realize that they have been trying to rescue her and knew that they had to rescue her because they knew that Varish was going to kill her. And Violet says like, Dane helped me, because Xaden's like, what the fuck, right? And, you know, obviously he betrayed her, but he's like, I had to get his guard down just a little bit. And in all of that happening, Violet's mom shows up and gives her this antidote so she can talk to her dragon again, because, you know, anytime this RSC bullshit goes on, they give them this stuff where they're cut off from their dragon and from their power. And so she gives her the antidote to make her better and says like, I didn't know about this, but like, know that from year 1, I told Xaden to protect you. And there's just a back and forth there where her mom is never soft with her. Her mom is not loving. She's not a huggy person, but she obviously was super worried about Violet and cares a lot about her well-being. But she's doing all this political shit, right? She is the head honcho running everything for the school and all this stuff that she isn't around a lot. And Violet doesn't cross paths with her all that much. And again, she's not really like the best mom, but she lets her know that like, I told him to look out for you. It's one of those things where you know that there's more to come from that story, especially because of everything that you've found out. And what I mean by that is in part 1, when Violet and Dane have a interaction before he saves her, not the second time and not the first time when he walks out of the room and doesn't use his power on her, But before that, they have a sparring match because it's part of training, and Dane forces her to spar with him so he can like talk to her because she won't talk to him. He says that your mom is the one that gave Xaden the lashes on his back. And so those 100 lashes are for the 100 kids out of the rebellion that he's like responsible for. And she did that. And because of that, I thought that Xaden was only ever going to be with you out of vengeance. And so I've always been worried about you this whole time. So you know that nugget throughout the story, right? And it comes to life in the dynamic with her and Xaden. But when you find this out from her mom later on and at the end of part 1, it makes you wonder, why did she do that? And why did he listen? And from what place was all of that coming from? But obviously it was out of a place of loving and caring about Violet, even though her mom doesn't always show it. And obviously Xaden did that. And there's more to come with why he did and that relationship. But at the end of part 1, it's not that all of your tension and your woes and your worries are gone, but a lot of shit has happened. And thankfully Varys dies, and you know ultimately that Dane is on her side, and they may never have the same friendship that they had before, and so much has changed and it's altered forever, but he is an ally. And so she's finally back with her people. She can be with her friends again and be truthful. She has more help to do research. She's gotten the shit kicked out of her in this first part over many, many months. So she's just so beat down in general in a lot of ways, but yet she persists. The last thing that I'll say about part 1, which I should have said before, I just said all of that lovely ending part, was another character that we were introduced that I mentioned before, Eric. He becomes very crucial, and he becomes crucial right at the end of part 1. Throughout the story, he ends up getting hurt at some point during training, and Violet offers to take him to the infirmary. And as they're talking, he essentially tells her the full-on truth that my dad thinks I'm like taking a birthday tour. I'm here because I knew that my guards were wearing different kinds of weapons, which is the material that kills Venin and Wyvern. He says, I know Venin and Wyvern are real, and I'm here because of it. I want to know what's going on. I want to protect myself. I want to help. I'm here because my people, my dad, my oldest brother who's in line to rule know, and they're doing nothing, and they're doing the same shit Navarre's doing, and it's bullshit. And at the end of part 1, what they come to realize through Jasinia's help too, is the book and the information that they need to be able to learn about getting through the ward is they need someone who has access, who is part of the king's bloodline, because it's in one of his like vaults and stuff. And that's where Eric comes in. So Eric does help them get that book and get some information that they need. But it's after they get back that Violet ends up getting taken by Varys. So I'm remembering this now. I mixed that up. I said that this last one was an RSC training. It wasn't. She was taken because they say that the wards were tripped in the vault. And even though she was there with someone of the king's bloodline, the wards were still tripped. And so they were alerted that somebody was there, and they, I guess, realized that it was her, and they want her to tell them who all was with her, and she won't give them up. But there's more that they have to do and more things that they have to accomplish. And Eric is going to continue to be a part of that. So he's a part of this squad. So it's Imogen. It's, I forget who Imogen's love interest is, but that person, it's Sawyer, it's Riddick, Rhiannon, Jasinia a little bit, obviously Xaden. And then Sloane, she's not fully in the know yet by this point, but she's around, and like they know, they're trying to look out for her. So she's going to come into the fold. And then a little bit of Dane. It's like the gang's back together. So once her friends understand everything that's happened and now want to help her and are, obviously on her side and in support of what she's trying to do, they make a plan, including Arik, to go get Lyra's journal. So Violet has been studying a lot of books and Warwick's journal, who Warwick and Lyra are like from the history books from way back, like some of the original 6 writers who were like some of the best of the best. And so they obviously are the ones who have all this historical context of a lot of things that like the archives don't, which is why a lot of people want their journals, because they want to protect that information or don't want it to get into the wrong hands or get into the hands of people who they don't want to know what's what. For example, in the scribe quadrant, one of the people really high up is Markham. And if he truly believes in what Navarre is trying to do, which is just protect its people and not say or be involved in anything to do with Venom and Wyvern, then he would want the journals to keep them protected, to know what they know, but also to make sure nobody else knows, so that other people don't find out about Wyvern or Venom. So anyway, Violet has had Warwick's journal and has been studying it, but is going to get Lyra's because it's protected in a place where only the king's bloodline can access it, in this like vault or whatever. And as we know, Eric is actually Cam, and Cam is the son of the king. So if Cam can get through the ward to get the journal, he also can like pull somebody through with him. And so the whole squad goes, they go on this mission. Eric pulls Violet into this vault with him or what have you to get this journal. They end up getting it, and when they get back, Violet gets snatched up and Nolan is there with her, and so she ends up like being relieved and is like, what's going on? And he's like, alarms went off, silent alarms went off, you guys triggered it, and people in power know about this journal, so we're alerted to it and we know that you had something to do with it. And what she comes to find out is that somebody else is in the room who can detect lies, and so they're there only to ensure that she says the truth, but also Varish is involved. And so, you realize that Nolan, he's a tough one. He's not a bad guy like Varish or Dane's dad, but he obviously is entangled with them for whatever reason, and he can't get out from under that. So even though he's occasionally helped Violet or keeps himself inserted to be able to heal her or her friends when certain stuff goes down with Varish, whatever the reason is, his lines are so blurred. And obviously this is one of those moments where Violet realizes like he isn't there to help her or save her. And so, quickly begins this process of her getting tortured by Varish and his cronies and them wanting information. And she quickly comes to realize that he really is after Xaden. He's not after Violet. This whole time he's taken great delight and pleasure in torturing her, but it's really been to try to get Xaden, because if he can get Xaden, then Dane can read Xaden's memories, or Varish can use whatever his power is and understand everything that he needs to know about what's been going on. And like, again, he knows that shit's been going on, but whether or not he knows the full extent of the revolution and all of that, not sure. But all he needs is Xaden. And so he knows if he has Violet, Xaden's going to come. And so she just, tries to hang tough through this whole thing. And Dane ends up becoming involved again because Varish wants him to read her memories. And they go through that whole same thing again. And Violet realizes that Varish has been training Dane. And ultimately, in this moment, Dane ends up giving in and reading Violet's memories and tells Varish what he wants to know. And of course, you're like, screw Dane. He, was kind of redeeming himself. He had bowed out last time. Like, what is this, right? But it quickly all unfolds because Dane ends up grabbing a weapon and stabbing Varish. And quickly, Xaden shows up. He kills the other person in the room whose signet was like to detect lies, and Violet is the one who ends up ultimately killing Varish. And all of her squad is there, and they were like, the minute you were taken, we were obviously working out a way to get you out. And Violet's mom, I think, was the one who ended up like alerting Xaden or calling Xaden to come. Many people were on their way, and she's so beat up. Violet is so torn up, because when she first entered that room, the drink that Nolan gave her was lemonade, but it had that dang serum in it that severs her ability to do magic or communicate with her dragon, which is when she knew she was in trouble. Anyway, she is unwell when they get her, and her mom is there and gives her the antidote from that serum that she took, and ultimately ends up telling her that, like, I made a deal with Xaden to protect you in year one. It's not as abrupt or maybe as awkward as I'm making it sound. I'm obviously just paraphrasing a lot of what is happening to give context to the situation. But essentially what you come to find out is that when Violet was coming of age to be able to make a decision about what she was going to do with her life, her trajectory was to be a scribe, and her mom forced her to be a writer. And so in this moment, and as they're exchanging words and whatever, she tells her about the situation with Xaden, which is that her mom made him a deal that if he protected her in her first year, that she would owe him a favor. And what ended up coming of that is that all of the children who were marked and were children of the rebellion, that they would get the opportunity to go into the Riders Quadrant. And yes, obviously they could be killed, but at least they would have a chance to survive. That was his ask and the favor that she gave him. So he got that, and all of them were Riders, and he protected Violet in her first year. So you find out why he ended up opening that door up to her, and obviously it ended up leading to them having feelings for each other and being where they are now. But it's a surprising gesture from her mom in the sense that she isn't always that motherly. She doesn't always have that much affection. You know, she can be a pretty cold woman, but you know that her decisions were always for a reason and from a place of protection. And this is just one of those moments where that's exemplified. But of course, in the back of your mind, it's also a moment where it's another secret that you know that Xaden had and didn't share that's probably going to come out in their dialogue as a couple in the future. So anyway, they all get out. And as, you know, they're making their way into like the general areas of the school, Taryn basically communicates and says that the Empyrean, which is, you know, like the rulership of all the dragons, says like if any rider and dragon wants to go, they can go. We are not forced to be here. If we want to go and be a part of the revolution, then we will do it. And like, we just need to get the fuck out of here, because it's, you know, even though Varish is dead, things are so inherently broken and so much is going on and misinformation being spread, and not everything is out in the open. It's just so complicated that they're like, we're done with this. You know, if your survival is better elsewhere or you need to go, you can just go. And so Xaden essentially rallies all of the people that are there. He says, this is the reality of what's been happening. You can decide what you want to do. And it incites a riot, basically, because people don't want to believe it, right? And a bunch of them leave, including some of the teachers, and a bunch of them stay and feel like Navarre is in the right and Basgiath is where they want to be and whatever. And the rest of them leave to go to Ryerson House and to go to Eratia. And that is where you end up at the end of part 1 of the book. Crazy first part of the book. And yet we have a whole other part to get through and to talk about. So again, so much has happened and so much has changed already in these stories and these characters that, you know, it's like, damn, okay, what's left for part 2? So this is where we're going to stop for part 1. I decided mid-editing that I'm going to split this up into 2 recordings for each part of the book, because there's still so much to talk about and go through for part 2. So we're going to end this one here, and we'll see you in part 2, friends.